And welcome back to Pastor Plek's podcast, where we talk faith, culture, and everything in between. I have in studio this fine morning Mrs. Catie Sas.
Hey!
And also the one and only Pastor Joseph Aiken, and I am so glad you are here.
I'm glad to be here.
All right, so we had a lot of questions from Sunday that we're still sort of wading through, and I really want to follow up with some of the questions we talked about on Tuesday, which was where we really had a talk about the vulnerability between spouses, confessing one another. Katie, you had some insight on that. You had a scripture you were going to share it, and then you never shared it.
I know. Well, we got so caught up in other discussions, and I didn't want to stop the flow, you know?
Yeah, that was nice of you.
All right, so I'll just, this is 2 Corinthians 4, verse 16. So we do not lose heart. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this light, momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. And I know this can probably be applied to so many things, but I think of the beauty in vulnerability, how initially it's really hard.
Right.
Initially, you're scared, you're nervous to share something really deep and secretive and shameful. But like the affliction that you're facing in that moment of fear does not compare to the beauty that comes after.
Right. And I think that's what ought to be. And I think the struggle for a lot of the marriages, at least I've been counseling people through, is what is.
Yeah. Is
that a person isn't thinking along those lines. They're thinking, it's not fair. How come he gets to? How come she gets to?
Yeah.
And what do you think is like how do we get from what is a filtered marriage that's painful to what ought to be naked and ashamed? What's the directional course of action that someone would take to get there?
You just choose to not be filtered. I mean, I
love the way you say it. I think that's true. But
you're either going to be honest or you're not.
Or I mean, because you can be honest and just not share stuff.
Yeah.
That's honest.
I mean, I guess vocally that's not honest, but internally that's
right.
not honest.
Yeah, and I think we've shared last time like that. Really, vulnerability brings out vulnerability. But I feel like that for some people, where it's like, I don't want to, because if I do, then they will. It's a real fear of rejection, a real fear of like, this is actually going to cause more damage than good.
Part of it is you just be, like you said, you just be honest, be vulnerable. That's an aspect, but you have to say in your mind that, hey, I want to be intentional about being open to you. And regardless if you're open to me and understand that you may not get it reciprocated in the amount, or the spouse may not go in the same depth as you'll go. And what happens when she doesn't? What happens when he doesn't? Do I keep sharing? Or when does it become oversharing? Is it oversharing with your spouse when it comes to those things? And so I do believe that there's that aspect of it, but you have to say, hey, I'm going to do this. I will be intentional about being vulnerable to my wife, because this is what God called me to do. And you read scripture where, hey, we may be talking about heaven, but the principle of it is that if I let go of this thing that's burdening me, like I'm holding on to, that is weighing me down in regards to my relationship with my spouse. If I let this go and I give it to God, then I expose myself, then I've done my part. Now, how can we do this as a couple? You talk about praying with your husband kind of daily. There are things you can put into practice, disciplines you can put into practice, that when you make them disciplines, then there's no way you can interact with God's word, interact with God, and not come out changed.
Yeah.
Right.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's good. Okay, let's move from that question. I think we got that one pretty much fulfilled from last time to this time. Any other thoughts on that, though?
No, I mean, not that come to mind right now.
Okay. So the next question was, I understand shame can impact your relationship, but is it wrong to take pride in your marriage? Which, for me, I thought this was a pretty simplistic one of like, no, of course you can take pride in your marriage, but I like the way he or she or this person juxtaposed. I understand shame can impact your relationship, but is it wrong to take pride in your marriage? What do you think?
No, I don't know.
Yeah, I think
I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah. So I feel like you're allowed. Not you're allowed. There's two types of pride, right? I feel like there's the pride that's like, look at me, I'm awesome, and the pride of like, here's something that I've worked hard in, that I've achieved, and I've done something really good. This is something that is a work of my life that you can take pride in. I feel like that's an okay thing, but it's not necessarily something that you're gonna worship, right? I mean, like that's always the scary part.
Have y'all heard that Kane Brown song?
Which one?
Called "Worship You."
No.
Oh my gosh, it's terrible theology, but it's so good. Like it's so well. Really, anything Kane Brown sings.
I don't
Have
know
y'all?
who that is.
Y'all?
I am like. No.
Do you not listen to country music?
I do, but it's been a while.
She's talking about me. No, I do not.
Oh well, you're missing out. So
Other than Cody Sparks.
What? That's Texas country, whole different genre.
well, no, he's basically talking about his wife in like using theology for God.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I want to. If you were a religion, I would worship you.
Oh.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, that's just what I thought of when you said worship your marriage. But no, I don't think there's anything wrong with being proud of the work it takes to have a healthy marriage.
Yeah, that's good. I kind of agree. Any other thoughts on that, Justin?
No, I mean, I'm with you. I think it's okay. Like I said, there's two different types. I'm not trying to make people feel less than. I just know we've been through a lot to get to the place that we're at.
I can take pride in my work. I can take pride in my boys. I can take pride in my family. I think that's a normal thing. Okay, this is an interesting question. If my spouse is thoughtful and buys me something, does that mean I have to return the favor because they said so? If my spouse is thoughtful and buys me something, does that mean I have to return the favor because they said so? This is such a loaded question. It's like we just entered into somebody's literal argument. Like, I know, we'll get Pastor Plek's podcast to answer this one.
I mean, it just sounds contractual.
Right. It's transactional. Yeah, contractual, transactional. You bet. It's saying, like, if I do this, then you do this.
Then the person that's demanding that they buy something for you in return, that's
If in that case, why don't you just buy yourself what you want and then be done with the whole process?
I mean, I feel like that's kind of what, like, children do. I don't...
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a transactional thing right there. I think for me, too, one of the things that I always tell couples is when, regardless of what we're going through or they're going through, it's like, hey, you can't love them how you want to be loved.
Right.
Like, if you would like gifts, just say, hey, one of my love languages are giving me gifts.
Right.
I love when you give me gifts. Now, don't buy me something because you just waiting for me to give you a gift. Because for me, that's not mine. I don't need gifts.
Yep.
So.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like me serving Ryan and then having the expectation that he's going to serve me in return. And so then if he doesn't in the way that I want him to, then I'm disappointed.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is wrong.
Right. Oh, yeah. So I think we got that. I think that question was, again, I felt like that person in the middle of the argument decided to loop us in. And I would love if it was a live argument. That would, okay, if someone wants to argue live on Pastor Plek's podcast, that would be a cool show. Because I kind of feel like
you could be like the sports cast.
Oh,
like you could like comment or be the argument commentary.
Oh, that would be really fun. Yeah, because I feel like a lot of these questions, and again, it'd be interesting if this person brought their spouse on the show. We could probably work through a lot of these issues. So if you're a person out there that wants to work through your issues on Pastor Plek's podcast, we are more than willing and able to help you do.
Well, maybe just y'all.
No, it'd be really great for you to be there. You'd be like,
and then she picks up the chair. She's about to,
All right, good. All right, hey, on this episode, I do want to cover something that has been in the news. That is what's going on in the Ukraine. Have you been following that? And you can be honest; it's okay. There's no judgment. This is like real things. What have you heard? What have you heard about Ukraine and Russia?
So I am only on social media once a week.
Hey,
one day a week. So I actually did not even know that was happening until yesterday when someone told me.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah. So
And I had a grainy picture I posted on our Facebook.
Yeah,
apparently.
you did. And you didn't tell me that you were posting a picture, that you wanted to post a picture. I would have found a much better one.
Oh, sorry.
But it's okay.
I just was in a moment and I was like, I can help out the team.
And like I told you earlier, it's better to share something than to not share anything at all.
Okay.
Even if it's a grainy picture that you found. So I'm like, oh my gosh.
All right, Joseph. Any thoughts on the Ukraine, or any things that you've seen, or just sort of like any thoughts on that?
Nothing I've necessarily seen or read through that. I've just kind of been praying, just praying through it all. I mean, war is never fun or good or pretty, any of that, and so I personally don't have any thoughts. Just my prayers to the families, and of course, social media, people are doing lives with them, with the bombings and different things like that, and you're like, man, this is hard to know that people are living through this right now. So it's just,
Yeah, I do have a little perspective. When I was at West Point, we trained on Soviet doctrine, which, because I was at West Point in the 90s, and Soviet doctrine really came out but it was proliferated in the 80s with the war in Afghanistan, and anyway, it was just intense. So it's been fascinating for me to watch. They're using old school doctrine of like essentially a war of attrition, which usually the Soviet Union had millions of soldiers, and now watching Russia do it with hundreds of thousands of soldiers, I don't think they're gonna be able to do it. I don't think they're gonna be able to take Ukraine. I think they're gonna run out of gas, or so logistics and supply lines are weak, and they're not built the way the Soviet Union was built. And I don't know if Putin was a KGB operative back in the day, and so he has like dreams of the glory days of Russia. And so I think in his head, we're just going to steamroll these people, but they don't understand that Ukraine has been training for this very thing for like the past 10 years. They knew this was coming. And so you've got an entire resistance built up among the people of the Ukraine.
So how does this affect America?
So several ways. One, we've frozen all the Russian banks, which then the ability to do loans, the ability to do business, oil is going to shoot up in price. Even though we have a ton of oil reserves, I think John Kerry is like our climate change czar, and he doesn't want us to go into any of our oil reserves, which is going to drive the price of gas way up the longer this thing goes on and we don't tap into that. It's going to cause the stock market to fluctuate.
Gas was already going up before.
So this is going to increase it.
Is this why it was already going up before?
No.
Or was it just Biden that was doing that?
Well, we shut off there's several things. Now we're getting into politics, but we shut off the XL pipeline that was like the pipeline that from Canada down to the U.S. that kind of we shut down gas and oil and drilling and all that. And so
I know that Biden kind of reversed everything Trump had in place.
Right. Yeah, as far as EPA climate stuff.
Yeah.
So that stuff was already going up. Inflation was already causing groceries to cost more. This makes the stock market more volatile, which from Wall Street to Main Street doesn't always necessarily make an impact. But if your Wall Street is fluctuating highly, that makes some corporations not want to hire because they don't know what the reality is, and you're on a steady growth trajectory. And so that makes it very challenging to bring more jobs. Now, in a world where we're in the Great Resignation, where nobody wants to work, we're in a weird world where we have a lot of opportunity, but nobody wants to take it because it's not.
So everywhere you go is understaffed and
if you've been to restaurants lately, it's been brutal.
It's a disaster.
It's like I'd rather just stay home.
Yeah.
We're in an these are interesting times. I mean, the Great Resignation. I never thought we'd be at a place where people are just like, nah, I'm good. I'm not going to work. It's just strange. So we're just at a different spot. But I think what's going to force this, what's going to happen is if the war in the Ukraine goes on, it's actually going to rally the stock market, because it means that Russia just can't just completely topple a democracy and take over. So that's going to bring more stability to the region as more people unilaterally go against Russia. But at the same time, war is always not good for economies unless your economy is built on building weapons. There you go. So that was probably a lot more than anybody cared to know.
Yeah.
That's fascinating to me anyway. I'm always, this stuff gets me.
Well, I'm just thinking of I'm thinking of kids.
Yeah. Well, the thing about Russia, kids is the thing to think about, but they also have a state church where you have to be like Russian, whatever Russian Orthodox Church. And whereas Ukraine is free to worship however you want. And so that becomes a real struggle for religion and faith, because if Russia takes over, freedom of speech is pretty much gone. And I feel like the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, whenever that is compromised, it makes it bad for the world overall. So the longer the Ukraine can hold out, it shows that Russia is not going to have the ability to steamroll Europe. And then also the thing that does make it get dangerous, which makes the economy fluctuate, is the threat of nukes. So when Russia starts threatening everybody with nuclear power, then we're like, if Biden doesn't come back and say, oh, bring in the nukes, we'll bring our nukes. Now all of a sudden you have the nuke fight, right? You have nuke war. And that gets super challenging. So how far will Putin go? So that becomes a real question.
Are people able to get out of the country?
Out of the Ukraine?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So they're fleeing by the millions to Poland, to Moldova. They're trying to get to a NATO country. So the Ukraine is not in NATO. Once Russia attacks NATO, it obligates the U.S. to fight Russia. So Russia is not.
Wait, what is NATO?
North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Okay.
So when the North Atlantic, that was sort of formed to kind of bolster against Russia. So the countries of like Moldova, Ukraine used to be in the Soviet Union. So it was kind of like the hard block of the Soviet Union split. It was Soviet Union, NATO, all the NATO countries. Does that make sense?
I'm trying to connect all of the.
So what it means if
history. I don't know.
No, if Ukraine is taken, and then or one of the other non-NATO countries is taken, then it puts Russia right up on the border of NATO, which then we're obligated to go and defend.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes it a big deal. Right now, we're sending money to Ukraine, but we're not sending soldiers. Whenever it comes to a NATO country, we're sending soldiers. It's like World War III. Does that make sense?
That's kind of terrifying.
Yeah, it is terrifying. This is kind of a big deal.
Do you think there's going to be another draft?
It's potentially. There's always could be.
Okay, so I was asking Ryan, like, if you get drafted, you like have to go.
Right.
But like, what if you say no?
Go to jail.
Well, that's freaking stupid.
Well, hey, that's part of being in. That's why it's tough. That's why we live in America, which is free, but that freedom comes at a price.
Yeah.
Someone's got to pay it. And the cool thing now is women can be drafted. So there you go.
No.
Equality has come, and so you should.
I don't want equality. Nope.
Yeah. All right. So there you go. Yeah. So yeah. That's it. It's a stark thing. So I think we do need to be praying. We need to be lifting up. Selfishly, we need to be lifting up the freedom of Ukraine so that our freedoms aren't hindered, but also just because there's Christians over there that are being persecuted. Mm-hmm. In Russia, your faith isn't free, and so they're trying to spread that tyrannical dictatorship of. And that's what I've talked about. The splinter net is happening because Russia and China. China's just watching this whole thing. If it's successful to take the Ukraine, they're going to take Taiwan.
Got their big old bowl of popcorn, just watching it all happen.
Exactly. So it's a deadly time. We need to be in prayer for the people of Ukraine, people of the world, because freedom as we know it and freedom of religion specifically is in the balance. Now, that doesn't mean if we lose all our freedoms that we're like doomed because we know that our hope is in Jesus, not in any earthly government. But it's still something to be concerned about.
Man, I just think of it as a mom, like if I was in that situation and my kid's life was in danger. Yeah. Like it's one thing if your life is in danger, if your husband's life is in danger, but if your kid's life is in danger, it's like a whole nother level of terrifying.
Right. And I just look at this, a World War III. I mean, not that we obviously don't want war, but it's a whole nother generation. We all have children that
are going to grow up in this world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And potentially could be going to combat.
Ugh.
All right. Any other thoughts, Joseph?
No thoughts from me.
No.
All right. That wraps it up. Hey, you guys have an awesome week of worship. We will see you next